Well, that was fun.
Hi,
everybody. Hey.
Hey.
Hello.
Hi. Good to see everybody. Welcome to the Nerdy Bunch.
Nerdy Bunch. Welcome to the Nerdy Bunch on a Saturday.
So,
welcome everybody.
Before anyone asks, Juliana will be joining us as soon as she can. She's having a little bit of technical difficulties. What is a live stream without technical difficulties, right? So today, Mark is doing an overview of religious studies, and we're really excited. We're going to get super nerdy. So, yeah. So, Mark, this is awesome. You have a new channel that you fired up, and you got tons of videos that you're uploading. So that's super exciting. So
yeah, my
great.
channel, I just sort of reamped it, and basically at Mark A. Turi, and for those who can go hop over there. So I'm live right now.
Yeah.
I don't have anybody yet, but I am faithful and hoping that at least someone will pop on to say hello. But I am live, and I'm going to check back and forth. And just hello to everybody who's on. Thank you so much. My analytics, I've had somewhere around over 300 views. I've got somewhere around 60 watch hours, and I think I've got around 40 subscribers. So not too bad for, I think I've, a week, maybe 2 weeks I've been doing this. So
Great.
not too bad. And I've been uploading previous Nerdy Bunch episodes and also stuff and interviews that I did anywhere from, just recently to the very first interview I did on YouTube with Mark Bunker, which was all the way back in 2009. So you can watch that on my channel. And then if you also enjoyed my PowerPoints, I have uploaded the one we did on the 2 weeks ago, which was my interest in history, or my history with history. And then, of course, last week we got really nerdy with Deep Space Nine. And so I have 2 parts up there of that PowerPoint presentation. Part 1 and part 2, and I'm really, really proud of that one. So I think it really did go well, and they're up there as well. So thanks for everyone for participating and watching, and even listening to me go on about Deep Space Nine. It's very appreciative. So thank you very much.
Yeah, that was fun.
That was a lot of fun. Yeah, I think we're all proud of that one. That was just a great time. So.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we got Chad on my chat here, and.
Yep, I'm going to stay on your channel at one of my ones. We all support each other.
Let's all go to at Mark A. Turi, Turi, and give him some watch hours and some love. Make sure you subscribe.
Thank you, guys. Yeah.
So, check out all the previous stuff that Mark's got there too, because of course that's watch hours too. So, do what you did with the rest of us and swing on over. And just kind of wipe through the entire library there and watch everything that you can. Build up Mark's watch hours as well. It's great. It's great to have Mark have a channel now. It's exciting. So we're pumped. Yeah. So absolutely. And then of course just a quick reminder. Where did they go now? Now I was going to be all slick with this, and I'm not. Here we go. Clearwater Chad, Clearwater Chad's channel. If you're not subscribed and not watching from there right now, hello, Selena. Chad's is at Clearwater Chad 9037 90210. I always have to say that. Yeah. Marilyn's is at Coffee Cults and Crafts. Juliana is at Scientheologist. And then there's mine at Denver Stevos. So make sure you swing by the entire group of 5 and like and subscribe if you haven't already. But yeah, why don't you just kind of plant yourselves at Mark A. Turi and watch the show for Mark's, and let's build up some of Mark's watch hours too. Oh, I dare not say. I will also have to say, you can also do that with Juliana's as well. Juliana is also working on the watch hours. So, but
2 tabs, 3 tabs, 4 tabs. We had people yesterday.
Get your phone going, your iPad going, get them all going. Mute all but one. Absolutely. So, without a doubt. So yay. So yeah, thank you everybody. And Mark, thank you.
Thanks as well.
Yeah, just I was going to remind people of something, and now I don't remember. Just a reminder, it's been a fantastic week here at SPTV Nation or ZNU Nation or whichever nation it is today. So, be joyous, celebrate, and just, smiling. So that's all I know. That's all I know. Quickly, Aaron, I should be sleeping. Do I need an EpiPen to fall asleep? Maybe. I'll tell you, I woke up early today and I was actually dozing off at my desk for a bit, but not within the last half hour. So I think some caffeine in me. I think we're doing good. We're doing good. So I appreciate it, Aaron. Thank you. Thank you for the concern.
Nice. So people are coming in, and great to see everyone. And again, if you're just coming in, please head over to @Mark A. Turi, Turi. Let's show him some love and some watch hours. It would be great. And please like and subscribe. That would be awesome.
I do want to thank. Oh yeah, I was gonna. Yeah, no, and I was gonna thank everybody as well. I know there are a couple of things on at this moment, and thank you all for whether you're split screening us with those or whether you're just here. Thank you. We always love the involvement and the participation during the show. Of course, everybody can always hop onto the replay crew as well, but it's always a lot more fun when you're here live. So,
hey, Lene, great to see you.
Hey, Lene.
Sweetheart.
Hey, Lene.
Yeah.
I think we have 2 Lenes, don't we?
We do.
One that has the little thingy over like one of the E's in her name, and then we have this Lene. So we have actually 2 Lenes. Not maybe not in the chat right now, but we've got 2 Lenes as part of SPTV Nation. I actually went to high school with a Lene as well. So, it's a beautiful name, and it's not. That's not as traditional, I guess, is all I'm trying to say. But it's a beautiful name. So, Lene, always great to have you here.
I love that name. Yeah,
it's a wonderful
beautiful.
Name. That's right. So, Mark,
Mm-hmm.
What can you?
Yeah, here we are, Mark.
Here we are.
Yeah.
What would you like to tell us about some really? Oh, wait, never mind. Juliana's about to hop
Yeah, we'll
in.
say hi to Juliana.
We'll let
Oh,
Juliana
good.
get
Oh,
you
yay.
first. Yeah. Hi, Juliana. She's working on it. She's working on it. Steve Britton, look at that. Oh, yep. Get your customer, Steve. Understandable.
Oh, cool.
Make the customers
Ooh, I got
happy
a new
and make a little
subscriber.
cash.
Thank you to Evelyn Lee Barney, who just became my new subscriber
Excellent.
6 minutes ago. Thank you
Evelyn.
so much.
Wonderful. Evelyn's a wonderful,
Thank you.
a wonderful
that's
member of the chat. So
And please hit
Oh,
the
that's
subscribe.
amazing.
Yes.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Peace and
Hello, Juliana.
love.
Hey, Julie.
Peace and love from Peace and Love.
Hey, Juliana.
Oh, there you are. Hi, sweet. Hi. Was she free though?
Shoot,
Hi,
Can we
sweetie.
hear her?
not yet.
I can't. Not yet.
No,
Steve-O never goes mute on his slides, am I right?
that's right.
Had to
Am I
throw that in.
right?
Oh, Thursday.
You know you did it, Steve-O. Oh.
I gotta tell you, Thursday night ZNU Nation, I had the whole thing prepped. I sacrificed monetization to play a really great song in the intro, and And then I got on and I had everything kind of, I was ready. I was in the groove. I was doing it. I was laying it out. And at about the 9-minute mark on the clock, I looked up and I see mute sound. There's emails coming in from John Sosowski and who else was it? Grand Theft Hoopty had both sent me emails saying I was muted, and I just was so upset. So I had to go back, essentially start from the beginning. And I'm like, yeah, I can't do what I just did. So but yeah, no, I never mute. That's so funny. I always mute so I'm not making noise when the music's playing, and then I hop on, I start talking, and I forget to click the dang mute button to turn it off. So yeah.
What the great thing was, everyone stuck with you. Didn't lose any viewers at all.
Well, I'm sorry. What was that, chat?
Oh, yeah, you didn't lose any viewers. Everyone stayed on the chat and just kind of was chatting.
I think I added. I think people were all excited to see Denver Steve-O talking mute. Yeah. It worked out in the end, didn't it, Creepy?
Yep.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a new trend. You could be doing silent podcasting.
It's apparently
just
so.
do like a silent film. Like you speak, but no one can see it, and then you put up like a graphic that says what you want to say, like the old school silent movies.
Oh yeah,
that would catch on, maybe. Yeah.
Oh.
And then all of a sudden, there's like a 10-second thing that says Scientology sucks, and then you come back and you're doing this, and then it says David Miscavige sucks, and then you're like this, and then it says like something else.
Just funny because it takes me like 30 seconds to do all the motions and stuff, and then it's just a quick little blurb. Yeah. Without a doubt.
Stop
how ideas are made.
Dianetics flyers.
Oh, funny.
Yeah.
Now we lost Julie again, so why don't we dive in, and she'll be back. I know she's probably doing a reboot or something to get that sound working. So, so why don't since we're here, Mark, why don't you tell us a little something about religion?
Okay, well,
how's that for a lead in, huh?
But, not a small feat, but I'll do my best. So basically, I like doing these kinds of issues and these kinds of topics because once I left Scientology, I was obviously very disillusioned and very hurt by Scientology. And of course, it calls itself a religion. And it took a little while for me to get into some of the things that like Steve Hassan talks about, which we've talked about on the Nerdy Bunch before. There is constructive, benign, and destructive. That's kind of the spectrum. And you kind of have to unthink some stuff that, maybe we've learned from the past. And there's also I think there's a lot of predatory people, whether they mean to be predatory or not, who are online or in real life, who will try to sort of exploit some anger that you're having. I mean, again, it's total, like I was totally angry when I left Scientology, and you do become vulnerable just as much as when I was getting into Scientology, because, you're disillusioned and you kind of become, ripe for the picking, so to speak. And I started to think about like, okay, is this really like, what is this phenomenon called religion? What does it mean? And of course, it didn't just come overnight. I read a lot of books. And then eventually, I think it was probably sometime, maybe, I don't know, over 5-7 years or something like that. After I had left, I started taking courses and I started listening to podcasts. And one of the things that was really great was iTunes University back in the day actually had a course that was just a basic religion course, and like little things like this. And then you can go onto YouTube and you can just type in like Introduction to Religious Studies, and some big university like Yale puts a lot on, and certain universities will put on actual courses. So usually they'll have 20 lectures or 16 lectures, and I've like listen to a lot of those. So you're basically auditing like a really high level freshman year. Hi, Julie, Juliana. Freshman year, course essentially. So yeah, so that was the thing. I sort of was getting, kind of angry and wanted to make sense of it. And then I kind of went through a period where I let my anger get the best of me, and I was kind of really bitter and stuff. And just in the past couple of years, I've been put that stuff aside and have gone back to learning more about religious studies and trying to do more reading and more studying. So with my slides, and I don't know how I get my slides up on here, but I can't remember now how I do it.
I can edit for you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you, Juliana. Yeah.
If you can hear me now, I can edit for you. Hi, everybody.
Oh, perfect.
Hi,
Yeah,
sweetie. You sound great.
Thank you so much.
You sound great, Julie.
Awesome. Oof.
Yeah, all is good.
Let me just do something here. Let me just put Mark up here. Okay.
So yeah, so basically, again, this is just like, this is just stuff that if you were going to take, if anyone was going to just take like what is called an introduction to religious studies at a university, like a secular kind of liberal arts college, and also in some religious schools, they teach religious studies, but this is mostly, just like a publicly funded university that's generally may or may not have a religious affiliation, but this is kind of just like some stuff that you would learn like just during freshman year. And I think it's actually very interesting, and I'll get into, when I start to develop the actual the slides here onto some of the things that we learn through more of an academic study of religion. And so sort of the first thing is just briefly to get into the history of religious studies and why it's interesting. So it's not a very complicated history, but it's a very important one. The gentleman on the left here is named Friedrich Max Müller. He was a German scholar, and it's kind of hard to say exactly like who is the first person who started religious studies, because like everything, a lot of academic pursuits, they evolve organically over time, and there's also multiple people. But in 1780, Friedrich Max Müller published a collection of works, a book essentially called Introduction to the Science of Religion. Of course, we don't use the word science anymore. You can just sort of swap that out for studies. But really, it was the first, or at least one of the first official academic pursuits of an academic, because, Max Müller was a lecturer, a professor. And he gave a lot of lectures on the subject of religion. So this book, Introduction to the Science of Religion, is a collection of his lectures, lecture notes and certain things that he was talking about. And again, what's really interesting is if you think of this year, 1870, right? That's 153 years ago. So from this point onward, and especially in the early 20th century, and this is sort of the first point about religion, this is when people in academia, mostly in the West, started to associate these different groups like Christianity and Buddhism and Hinduism and Judaism and etc. And really the term world religion and this idea of religion as we know it today, which is a very Western concept, is really about 150 years old. Go before this, and most people wouldn't have associated Christianity and Buddhism together. There's actually no evidence really, whether it was on the Silk Road or even before that somehow Buddhism and Christianity would be under the same thing. And even the term Christianity, most people, especially during the Middle Ages, were Catholic or Protestant. And this is what the fighting was about during all these wars in France and especially in Germany. They weren't Christians fighting each other. They were Catholics fighting Protestants. And even those two things were very, very different in the eyes of each group. And so this collective umbrella term that we call world religions is an academic term. This is not necessarily something that go back, even hundreds or thousands of years. that the average person would have been aware of. A Buddhist monk traveling on the Silk Road to Venice wouldn't have really associated the Catholicism as a religion, and a Catholic priest, going to Afghanistan on the Silk Road wouldn't have necessarily thought of that as well. So that I find to be very interesting. And that's sort of the first jumping point, which is that the term religion is a Western term, and it's definitely something within the past 150 years. The next one, though, we have to get into what is the actual, what is religious studies when it comes down to it. So this definition is from Wikipedia. Again, I went through several types of definitions, and I just found that this was one of the more precise and easy to sort of answer one. But religious studies, also known, of course, as the study of religion, is an academic field devoted to research into religious beliefs, behaviors, and institutions. It describes, compares, interprets, and explains religion, emphasizing systematic, historically based, and cross-cultural perspectives. So something to note about religious studies is it's not trying to prove whether or not religion, quote unquote, is true or false based on anything else, right? It's not like, well, they don't even make the claim that, well, all religions are true or all religions are false. They're just looking at religions as an umbrella term in terms of the belief, some of their actions, their impacts on society, looking at history, looking at culture. That's really what religious study is. And obviously, there is this phenomenon that academics have made in the past 150 years called religion, and therefore the study of it is something that goes beyond just is it true or is it not true based on whatever our philosophical beliefs are based on how we interpret science today. That has nothing to do with religious studies. It's just more diverse and transcends some of the ideas of true or false. So it's more of the gray area, and it's more looking at culture. So,
can I just ask? Doesn't have to be now, but it can be later. Can you just later maybe go back and go over the symbols that you have there, because it's hard to in the previous slide. Because I was trying to read, and I think the quality of the image or either on my screen made it hard.
The quality is not the best. I apologize for that. So
no, that's okay.
If we go from the top left, we have Judaism. That's the Star of David. Next to that is the symbol of the Baha'i faith, which is an Iranian religion. Confucianism in the middle. Next to that says native. Then Islam, which of course is the crescent moon and star. And the second row starts with Sikhism. That's a religion from India, from Punjabi. Taoism, the yin yang. Wicca, which is sometimes collectively known as the witches, or modern, that kind of religion. Shinto is after that. This is a Japanese religion. Then the cross, with a sort of a different looking cross from the traditional Catholic cross, is the Eastern Orthodox religion. That, of course, is the churches in mostly Eastern Europe, Romania, Russia, Bulgaria. And then from the bottom row, Hinduism. In Georgia, yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And then on the bottom row is Hinduism. That is the Sanskrit letters for Om. That's their symbol. Buddhism, which is the wheel or the circle of life. After that says Roman religion, obviously the old Saturn and Mars and them. Paganism, and then Catholicism. So those are the different ones there. Yeah, no worries. I clip stuff out. So again, if the images are not great, just let me know. The next one here is just we have to sort of look at what religious studies is. Okay, so religious studies is interested in humanities subjects. So the first humanities subject is something I'm interested in, which of course is history. So religious studies is interested in the history of religion, meaning how old is a religion, how far back does religion go, and when it comes to certain religious groups, right, who founded them, How long ago was that? And who were the people involved? How did it spread? And so forth. The next one, of course, is philosophy. I've talked previously on other podcasts with Doug and other shows about philosophy of religion, which I took a couple courses on in college in the US. And that's really examining the questions that religions try to answer. So, for example, is there a God? Is there a life after death? What is the purpose to this life? How can we be good people? Those questions that, religions will say, maybe yes, we have an answer. Maybe the answer is, a dogmatic straight answer, but sometimes it's also kind of wishy-washy and up to you. But those are the answers, or at least the questions that religions try to answer. And then religious studies is also interested in social science. So when we look at social sciences, we look at sociology. Of course, sociology is the study of society. So what is what is the impact of religion, and what does it have on society? Is it generally a positive impact or a negative impact? And that's very much varies from country to country and state to state and area to area, because sometimes religion is very mute in a society and sometimes it tries to dictate laws. So what are those impacts? We have psychology, right? I know that it tends to be kind of a talking point among some people, especially you get this on the internet, which is all religion is just for weak people who lack critical thinking, for comfort, and whatever, like who whatever negative it is. And they're not necessarily wrong, but like most religious people themselves don't think of themselves as weak people who need something to believe in, who can't get over an idea from their childhood. That's not what people who are believing actually believe. Those are just things that people think about it. So it becomes a lot of straw man fallacies and also kinds of different arguments. And again, it's not necessarily wrong, right? It's just not the whole picture, and so on. So worshiping the supernatural, lacking critical thinking skills, whatever. Anthropology is this study, of course, of cultures, and it focuses on things like rituals and what those mean to different cultures. And of course, the anthropology of religion is a subject that is interested in religious studies, because many of the rituals that we associate with religion, such as funerals, have actually been around for a very long time. Some of the early remnants, and getting now into archaeology, of course, is studying the things of the past that may be literally under dirt that we have to dig for. And one of the interesting things is around the sites of early Homo sapiens are icons and things that may suggest that even our earliest Homo sapien ancestors had some kind of expression about a funeral, about maybe hoping that they would see the person again, or having some kind of icon or something that gave a kind of reverence to the person who passed. So again, it doesn't prove anything necessarily, but at least the idea is that some sort of religious expression or spiritual expression has been with Homo sapiens for a very, very long time. And so that also is something that's interesting to religious studies. Another thing is stuff like we might talk about biblical archaeology, right? Okay, the Bible has a lot of stuff that's not true. But, again, the flood probably wasn't worldwide, but was there evidence that there at least was a flood in the Middle East? Maybe, right? Okay, there probably wasn't an ark. There, talk about Solomon's temple, like little things like this. Like, there is a lot of allegory and metaphor, but some of the stuff may or may not be true. Let's use archaeology to figure that out. So religious studies, of course, is interested in that. Religious studies is also interested in studying religious texts. So if you enjoy reading different texts and not just the Bible, but Buddhism has many sutras, like the Heart Sutra and the Lotus Sutra. Hindus have the Vedas, and on and on and on. Judaism, we have the Torah and the Tanakh. The Islam has the Quran, of course. If you enjoy reading them, then that's maybe religious studies is for you. Visiting places of worship, because that is really where culture and ritual play a very prominent role when we talk about religion. Okay, so the house of worship or the place of worship is where the culture of the religion, it's where essentially people who have these beliefs are doing certain things and actions. And so it is really interesting to visit some of those places. I've been to many houses of worship. I think they're really cool because, some people sit in pews, some people sit on the ground. You have different statues and architecture, and it's really kind of cool. And I've loved being in a big city like Toronto, where I can visit, I visited Sikh gurdwaras, I visited mosques and synagogues and temples and shrines and churches and like everything. And I just find it very interesting because of those cultural differences. And also interviewing religious people again, sometimes we foo-foo some of this idea of, well, all religious people are the same. Well, okay, that's, again, it's not necessarily false. I don't want to say that if somebody holds that kind of belief that they're necessarily wrong, but there's just more to the story. So again, looking at the psychology of religion, like, why do people believe? Is it just because our brain chemicals are squirting in our head? Sure, but that's just one, part of it. It's not the whole thing. If you ask someone why do they believe, they're not going to say because I lack critical thinking skills and I'm weak in chemicals. There's this whole subjective experience that religion gives some people, albeit it doesn't give every person the same thing, right? It can't, it doesn't. This is why there's different varieties. But for some people, it's very important, and interviewing religious people is part of that. It's part of trying to find out what makes these things attractive and what makes religious people tick, essentially. And then the other thing is, what I do find very interesting is that one does not need to be religious or have a religious affiliation in order to study religious studies. So let's say someone is spiritual but not religious. That usually means they believe in God or they believe in like an afterlife or whatever, but they don't have a religious affiliation. That person can 100% study religious studies. Someone is an atheist or an agnostic and they don't have a religious affiliation. They can 100% study religious studies, because it's not about studying, why people should become religious, or it's not studying studying religious studies is not the same as going to a Bible college where essentially everyone would be Christians studying the Bible. It's not the same as a yeshiva, which is the seminary for mostly Jewish people who read the Talmud, which takes 7 years because it's such an extremely long book. So you don't necessarily have to be religious or have a religious affiliation. I've known people who are atheists who have studied religious studies, because why not? They're just as interested in religion as everybody else. They just have their own convictions, and that's okay too. So that seems to be something where it's like, oh, you're going to religious study, you must be religious. Not necessarily. So what religious studies is not, it's not the same as theology, and it's not the same as divinity studies. So theology, of course.
Mark. What is theology? I must know now. Oh boy.
All right. So I don't know the official definition, but religious studies is probably more of a subjective study. Theology is probably more getting into doctrine and beliefs and more, deep in the actual, sausage of it all, I think.
It makes sense.
Yeah. Because I know quite a few people with theology degrees.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, he can come back in. Let's see. Zeno got him.
Hi, Creepy V.
Yes,
sorry I was late, guys. Technical BTs.
Yeah, we're used to those, aren't we?
And now we have another one that got to Mark in the middle of his lecture.
Been happening a lot.
I know, right?
Steve-O and I were on with Liz Ferris last night. The same thing happened. Oh, here he comes. Okay. Let him back in.
Hey, sorry guys, I have
There
no
you
idea.
are. That's all right.
Kicked off for whatever reason. What was the last slide I was on was what religious studies is not, right? Was that the last one?
You were
Okay.
you were in the middle of saying the difference between religious studies and theology. You were going to start explaining what it is, and then you go.
Okay.
Let me add your slides back up.
Yeah.
That was like a whole Raiders of the
This
Lost
one?
Ark thing. Your face melted off, except it was your internet connection.
Evelyn said Zeno got you.
Mhm.
Let me just take Mark off the bottom because we keep popping comments up there and it's not cool. That
Yeah.
Oh no, he's
We lose him again.
No.
It's buffering again. Come on, Zeno.
No.
We're on your side, dude.
That's right. You're the creator, Xenu.
PBB. I think Osa
Not the
is around.
creator.
Xenu created us.
He did not, dude. He
Created
did not.
us the way we are.
He did not. Oh, okay. So, but he's not a creator. We're gonna have that debate someday.
All right.
Back.
Another mark. Okay, here we go.
Double Mark.
There we go.
Oh, I'm here.
Hang on.
Boy,
Let me do
gewollt.
something.
It's a nice Yiddish phrase. Connection troubles. I'm so sorry, guys, but let me
Let's
get
put
back
Mark
to my
here.
slides. I think it's my the
Myself.
BTs.
Yep.
BTs are interfering with the internet, so I got to do some auditing after clear them up.
I
Wow.
told
I haven't
Zeno
done
to
my
take
drug
Adrian
rundown yet.
Miscavige. Oh boy. Speaking of drugs, while that's loading, did you guys see the letters that Denny Masterson's friends and family or whatever wrote?
Mhm.
And they're all saying, like, all of them, one thing they all have in common was like, he was super against drugs. No drugs. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense, Scientology, but so what?
Wow.
Right. Of
Okay,
course,
here we go.
the clarification that alcohol is a drug. So
Raging alcoholic, but he didn't do drugs, so
right.
he's a nice man.
One way
Yeah,
around.
and
Yeah.
he was like, he told me not to do drugs. He taught me not to do drugs,
Okay.
so I owe him my
So
life.
what religious
Okay.
studies is not? Hopefully the BTs won't be infecting the internet, so I will go on. So I apologize again. But here we go. So what religious studies is not? So religious studies is not the same as theology or what's called divinity studies. So what it isn't is that it's not the study of God or the nature of God. That in and of itself is what theology is. Excuse me. So theology studies God, studies the nature of God, and religious studies does not do that. Of course, we're going to talk about God and theories of gods and stuff in religious studies, but it's not the focus. And so one thing to note here is that a degree in religious studies does not qualify one, does not make one qualified to be ordained within a religious organization. So what this means is, let's say someone wants to become a priest, a minister, a reverend, a rabbi, or any other type of clergy, usually in a very mainstream religion. You have to have a Bachelor of Arts degree, and then you have to have a master's degree. Usually in the US and Canada and other parts of the English-speaking world, as well as other parts of Europe, in order to become like a Catholic priest or a minister in the Anglican Church or the United Church, Methodist, etc., you would have to take a master's degree in theology or divinity studies. I think theology and divinity studies are very similar, if I'm not mistaken. I'm a little less qualified to talk about divinity studies, but theology, of course, is the study of God. So if you take, if someone wants to become a minister and they take a BA, yeah, of course they can take a Bachelor of Arts degree in religious studies. That's totally fine. But people might also take history or philosophy, sociology, anthropology, pretty much anything in the humanities, social sciences, or even outside of it. But the idea is you do your master's degree in theology and divinities. And then there's always an option to become a doctor and do a doctorate, and again, usually in theology or so forth. So by just having a degree in religious studies, You don't necessarily become clergy, but you can become a religious scholar depending on how far you go. So you have a bachelor's, you have a master's, and then of course there are PhD programs. And throughout, most mainstream colleges, I know in the Ivy League schools in America, they have religious studies. Harvard has one of the best ones. Yale, of course. And then in public schools in the states, they'll have the California state system, the Colorado state system, the Florida state system. They also will have, religious studies faculties, and they will have those 3 tiers. So the BA, the MA, and then the PhD. One of the really, really interesting things about religions is a lot of people talk about their similarities, but religious studies also talks about their differences. And I know that sometimes when we talk about the differences, it can also be, I hate the term non-PC, right? It's not politically correct to talk about our differences, but really that's not the point of it. To talk about the things we have in common, which there are some things that religions have in common, but there are also some differences. We just have to acknowledge that. And religious studies will acknowledge this. And how they do that is by looking at the different types of religions. And of course, there's always, 3 options, because in an academic sort of pluralistic perspective, there's always a third option. So we have this idea of universalizing religions and ethnic religions, but then there's also what they call hybrid, which is kind of a mix of both of them. And I'll get into some examples of the third option after I, discuss these 2. So what's the difference between a universalizing religion and an ethnic religion? In the picture on the left, under universalizing religion, we have 2 LDS, aka Mormon missionaries in Africa, okay? And they're proselytizing to an African woman, right? This picture is exactly what a universalizing religion does. It's missionaries going out into the world in order to proselytize and convert people to bring them into the church. Now, if you grow up in most Christian churches, this is pretty standard. Jehovah's Witnesses knock on doors. LDS missionaries, Mormon missionaries are active all over the world, okay? When I go here in Budapest, there are, Jehovah's Witnesses everywhere. I mean, they're on mostly of the main public transportation stations. So what are they trying to do? They believe that there is a gospel or a message that supersedes, or in some cases transcends, a person's ethnicity, language, background, culture, etc. Now, in the case of some churches, they probably are hesitant to try to convert those that may be homosexual, maybe transgendered, and so forth, although some churches are not. So usually when it comes to sexual preference, gender identity, gender expression, some churches like the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses kind of tiptoe around those, and they don't really proselytize to those individuals. But the main central point of a universalizing religion is that the message goes beyond culture, language, background, in some cases race or racial identity, and especially that term ethnicity, which is a combination of all those things, okay, including history and so forth. Ethnic religions, and this is a group that belonged to what is called the Zoroastrian religion, which was an was the religion of ancient Persia. So if you remember the Persian Empire, if you ever studied Greek history, the Persian Empire were Zoroastrians, and this is 5 individuals praying over fire. Zoroastrians are an ethnic religion. Why? Because they do not proselytize. If one is a Zoroastrian, they are born into it. Their mother must be a Zoroastrian. And then that person is automatically a Zoroastrian. There is no chance to convert. There are no missionaries. There are no proselytization. So even if one wanted to be a Zoroastrian, there's no opportunity to do so. One is born into that faith, which is also linked to one's ethnicity, and that's it. So these are really the 2 differences here. What is a universalizing religion? Again, think missionaries, think proselytization, and ethnic religion think you have to be born into it. I will also say that there are ethnic religions that in the next slide we're going to get into where you can convert. So the idea of converting or not converting is not the total, similarity between all ethnic religions, but the idea is that there's a group of people, a group who have an ethnic identity, and along with sharing a language and a history and a culture, they also share a religion. Okay, so that is the difference between these two categories, and those are pretty important in religious studies. Some examples, okay? When we get to universalizing religions, they happen to be the religions that are the fewest, but also the most successful. So Buddhism started off as a universalizing religion. This is how Buddhism spread from India to places like Nepal and Afghanistan, as well as all the way to Japan, China, and Southeast Asia. Today, Theravada Buddhism, which is the majority in places like Thailand, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, is considered a hybrid, which means that when someone is born Thai, ethnically Thai, most of those individuals are Theravada Buddhists. It's also especially the case in Sri Lanka. When someone is Sinhalese, you can bet money that they are most likely Buddhist. So again, the religion might be universalizing, but the denomination is kind of a hybrid. It's kind of an ethnic religion, or maybe a national religion is another one. So there's these little hybrids that are in there where it kind of walks the line between the two. And Buddhism has about 470 million followers worldwide. Next, of course, is Christianity. I'm sure most people who grew up in a Christian church will probably know the history of Catholicism, Protestantism. Catholicism and Protestantism, for better or for worse, okay, grew with the development of colonialism, building ships going from places like England and Spain and Italy and France and so forth, and Spain and Portugal, and going over first to the New World, North and South America, the Caribbean, also going into Africa, and then going into the South Pacific and the Australian continent. And they spread Catholicism and various forms of Protestantism. It's one of the reasons why the United States is mostly Protestant and why Canada, for example, is mostly Catholic. And once you get south of Mexico, it's mostly Catholic, although there are some islands in the Caribbean that may also be, mostly Protestant, especially if they have an English heritage. And today, there's 2.6 billion human beings in the world are consider themselves Christians in one form or another. Okay, the only exception now is the Eastern Orthodox Church. When the Eastern Orthodox Church, someone is born, okay, if they're Greek or if they're Russian, if they're Bulgarian, that tends to kind of also walk the line, because the Byzantine churches of way back when did have missionaries, but eventually they kind of created their own dioceses within these countries. And so, most Russians are Eastern Orthodox, most Greeks are Eastern Orthodox. Same goes for, Romanians and so forth. So while the religion itself is universalizing the denomination, not necessarily an ethnic religion, but it's closest to it. And then, of course, Islam, which holds 1.8 billion followers. And the only ethnic religion and within Islam, the ethnic denomination, there is one called the Ismailis, and they're very well known in Canada. I actually grew up and I had many friends that were part of the Ismaili faith. They grew up. I grew out of, of a Shiite denomination, of Shiite Islam, and they are considered an ethnic group because they went from Pakistan, and many ended up in Uganda and Tanzania. And then during their revolutions and turmoil in those countries in the 70s and 60s and 70s, many moved to Canada and the United States. So they are considered, again, to toe that line. But again, between Sunnis and Shiites, they're also universalizing. They have missionaries, they want converts, and they preach. and there are again 1.8 billion. So over 50% of the world, maybe even 55% of the world, belong to these three religions. They've been very successful in getting converts. On the contrary, on the contrast here, ethnic religions, they have more religions that are part of ethnic religions, but they have fewer people, the most being Hinduism. A lot of people have sort of this interesting thing with Hinduism because there is, of course, one group of Hindus that do proselytize and do look for converts, and that's the Hare Krishnas. And in some cases, the Hare Krishnas might actually be more visibly Hindu than the average mainstream Hindu people are in certain cities and so forth, especially outside India. But for the most part, they don't proselytize. And one of the reasons is Hindus, in a very mainstream sort of liberal interpretation, everyone in Hinduism, every person in the world has a little bit of the divine inside of them. And as long as they live in a and have good karma, then they will be reincarnated with a better a better life in the next life. And so you don't necessarily have to be Hindu in order to do that. You just have to lead a good life. And so when people convert, again, it's not that people who are Hindu are coming knocking on your door. It's because you go to the temple and you'd like to become one, and then there's a process. Judaism, a lot of people are shocked when Jewish people tell them, yeah, there's only 15 million Jews in the whole world. There's like more people in LA County. There's more people in the province of Ontario. There's more people in the city of Istanbul than there are Jewish people in the entire world. We have a very small population. Most of us live either in the United States or Israel. And yeah, you can convert, of course, to Judaism. This is one of the things like Hinduism. There is a possibility to convert. However, it goes through tradition where some rabbis will actually try to dissuade you from converting. There's an old tradition where converts need to ask a rabbi 3 times in order to convert before the rabbi will actually let the person convert. And that's because there's a lot of laws that go along with being Jewish. You got to change a lot of your eating habits. You got to pray 3 times a day. And so this idea is like weeding out the people who might seem, like they don't want to do it or they're doing it for a superficial reason. Whatever the answer is, generally speaking, Jews definitely don't proselytize. There is a group called the Chabad Lubavitch, and these are the people who are Hasidic Orthodox who proselytize to other Jews about being more observant. And so there's like this weird, I guess loophole, but whatever. That's a whole controversial issue, whether or not proselytizing to other Jews to make them become more observantly Orthodox is actually proselytization. My opinion is it's yes, but their opinion is it's no. Next is there's a lot of groups that would consider themselves pagan, folk religion, or animist. Going back to paganism, think of most European cultures before Christianity, like Greece and Rome. Folk religion is what is in China and also in Japan when there's multiple religions being practiced at once. In China, Chinese folk religion is a combination between Mahayana Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism. In China, it's a combination between Shinto and Buddhism, but there's other folk religions in Asia and throughout the world. And then animism is usually the general term given to the spiritual practices of the indigenous peoples in North and South America, of course, in Africa, and also in the South Pacific and Indian Ocean. So the Australian continent and parts of Asia. Indonesia, for example, and collectively 600 million people will follow one form of another of pagan folk religion or animism. Shintoism is the ethnic religion of the Japanese people. There are 3 million followers, and just because I mentioned Zoroastrianism in the last slide, there are no more than 120,000 Zoroastrians in the whole world. And it's a very small number, but again, they don't look for converts. So these are the ones where you're either born into it or there might be some kind of opportunity to convert, but it might be scarce. Juliana?
I would just like to observe that there are more Zoroastrians than Scientologists.
Yes, very much. Yes. Yeah. There's also more Rastafarians than Scientologists as well. Yeah.
Right.
That sounds like more of a fun religion than Scientology anyway.
True.
Very much, yeah. So the next is, I know that it's very popular to assume that like religion and God are like the same thing. And in religious studies, we look at the origin of that. So when people say that God, or that religion, excuse me, is about having belief and faith in God, okay, that in of itself is one of these things where, yes, it is true, but it's not the entire story. So understand that America is majority Protestant. That ever since the Puritans came over, they were like hardcore Anglicans, right? That's a form of Protestantism. Lutherans came over, Methodists came over, Baptists came over. I may have said this on the Nerdy Bunch, I may have said this with Doug, but if you look at major denominations in Protestantism, a whole number of them began their life in Europe, like Baptists, Quakers, Methodists, Mennonites, but they really, really got going in the United States. Now, of course, Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, I think Pentecostals, if I'm not mistaken, Marilyn, have their advent or their foundings in America.
Yes.
But that's few. I think most of them came from England or various parts of Europe.
The Shakers as well. The Shakers came from the Burn over district, Christian Science, Mormonism, all that one area in New York. Isn't that crazy?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, right? There was that religious revival with Joseph Smith in the 1840s, 50s, whatever. But if you look at most mainstream denominations, like look at how many Methodists there are in England or how many Quakers there are in England, it's nothing compared to what's in the United States. So the perspective that God and religion are the same actually comes from, again, a Western Protestant idea of religion, which is not wrong, but it is simply a Western Protestant perspective. So if it's not Western and it's not Protestant, then religion and God don't necessarily go together like peanut butter and jam. You know what I mean? So there is definitely a difference. So now we have the concepts of theistic religions and non-theistic religions. So a theistic religion is simply a religion that has what we would call an espoused belief about a god or gods. And next week, I'd like to go into the different theological stances. So we can look at these different ideas of theism and what that actually means. We can do that next week. But essentially, whether you're monotheist or polytheist, whatever it is, that's a theistic religion. So Christianity is generally a theistic religion in the sense that the majority of Christian churches believe in a God, and then they might have some kind of other beliefs about Jesus, the Bible, the Trinity, all of that's kind of debatable, but there still is a God, right? Hinduism is interesting because, again, there are multiple different perspectives, although generally speaking, there are Hindu gods, and Hindus might believe in something that goes beyond those gods. But there's also a couple of teachers in Hindu history that were atheists, and they actually denied and rejected the concept of gods altogether, yet they were still Hindus. Islam, again, generally speaking, almost all are very theistic. Judaism, we have 6 denominations. We have 3 major ones and 3 minor ones. One of the minor ones is called humanistic Judaism. This is considered non-theistic. So in Judaism, we have prayers, of course, daily prayers, prayers for our holidays and Shabbat. And what the humanistic Jewish movement did is they've removed the words God, which in our books is called Adonai, and they have inserted a more secular and humanistic words. So they take the Hebrew words of God, they remove that, and then they add like humanity or human light, which is a very humanistic and secular humanistic way. So they're considered non-theistic, even though, again, the majority are theistic based. Sikhism is a religion from India. They believe in one God. And again, going back to our Zoroastrians, they also have a god. Now, when it comes to non-theistic religions, this term non-theistic in this context means that either the religion itself outrightly rejects the concept of a god, or it doesn't espouse one, which means that their religion is about something other than God. God may not even be mentioned in some cases. So the first is Buddhism. Theravada Buddhism. In Theravada Buddhism, there is a complete rejection of gods and creator gods. There is, like in Mahayana Buddhism, there is what is called devas. These devas are considered higher beings that live in different dimensions, but they are imperfect and they are immortal. Or they are mortal, excuse me. They're imperfect and they're mortal. So even beings in other dimensions, which other religions like Hinduism would call gods, in Buddhism they say, well, they're just like us, and they also are subjected to the laws of karma. So they're not actually gods; they're just beings like us. Buddhism is about enlightenment, and it's not about gods. Okay, still considered a religion. Confucianism. There's some schools of Confucianism where some people may be polytheistic and bring a folk religious Chinese gods and polytheism. But for the most part, Confucianism didn't teach anything about God. He taught about a way of living and a system. He taught about hierarchies and so forth. So his thing was not about God, it was about how to live. Still considered a religion. Daoism. I know we have some Star Wars fans. Okay. George Lucas based the Force off of Daoism. So if you know what the Force is in Star Wars, that is not a god. That is not a separate being. That is something that is in the universe. It is spiritual, of course. It's everywhere. And of course, but it is not a god. So the point of Daoism is become one with the Dao, right? One with the Force, which is not God. So Daoism is considered non-theistic. There's a group in America that was founded in New York by a gentleman named Felix Adler in the 19th century. It's called the Ethical Culture Society. They have chapters all around the United States. And they are a religious humanist organization. So they are a religion, but they don't teach God. They teach that their religion is how to act. And they are famous for believing in what they call a deed before creed. So in some ways, they're very similar to Buddhism. Some members are considered atheists and agnostics, but some members might believe in a god or something else. It's totally up to the individual. Jainism is a religion from India that flatly outrights the existence of creator gods and all kinds of other gods. They believe, similar to Scientology, that one can become godlike, which is also something similar in Buddhism. Okay, and I'll get into what that means in future presentations when we talk about different forms of theism. The last one is the Unitarian Universalist Association. They don't explicitly have any teaching or any creed when it comes to God. So some members are atheists and some are agnostics, some are humanist, but some are Christians and Jewish and Hindus and deists, and they have a very pluralistic way. And they're also considered religious humanism. So again, just to know that God and religion are not necessarily, yes, it's true that God and religion are a part of the package for theistic religions, but in atheist or non-theistic religions, there are definitely some nuanced differences. Okay, and that's sort of the main point there. Some sociological perspectives. Okay, look about the sociology of religion. Just going to go through this a little bit quickly, and then I'll go on to the next. There's only a couple more slides left after this. So the founding fathers of sociology each contributed to religion and how religion impacted society. Karl Marx, Emil Durkheim, and Max Weber, again, all considered the founding fathers of modern sociology. Karl Marx and Max Weber were Germans, and Emil Durkheim was French. Karl Marx put forth what is called conflict theory. Of course, he's very famous for his class conflict theory. But when he was looking and developing that class conflict theory, he was also looking to how religion itself attributed to class conflict theory, which he believed that religion and class led to more exploitation and more divisions and divides between the have and the have-nots. Now, much like most things that Karl Marx wrote, he is true. There are religions that focus on exploitation of their followers and dividing between classes. It's kind of a generalization, but he's not necessarily wrong on this. Especially when I think of conflicts of religion, I definitely think of the geopolitical situation in the United States, and I find very, very sad. But I do definitely think that that is a good example. Emil Durkheim talked about symbols. That was his thing, religious symbols, and how those symbols that religion gives us gives life's meaning. It gives us something to fight for and something to stand behind. Emil Durkheim was very interested in looking at the social impact of suicide. And so he believed that one of the ways that society, of course, could move away from that was to give people meaning, to help them have meaning, and he believed that was through symbolism. Max Weber wrote a book called The Sociology of Religion. I've read it a couple times. It's a great book. He took an approach called functionalism. Max Weber said that religion plays an important role in our society, regardless of whether or not it's actually true or not, because it holds societies together. It exists purely on the basis that it has a very unique function in our society. Okay, so I just wanted to go over those little things just to bring a little bit of like, why is there religion? And these are just some explanations. This is my second last slide, so I believe I only have one more after this. And I wanted to touch on this also because when I first studied religious studies was in a freshman year in high school. It was back in 1997 or 1998. And I remember learning about this definition, which is now considered outdated. And it's called the 5 C's of religion. So this was an attempt for religious scholars to say, well, what do all religions have in common? Well, they have these 5 C's. And again, I'll go through why that's a little bit not the case in just a moment. So in the 1970s, scholars decided that these 5 C's were what every religion had. So they determined that every religion had a creed. So it was a commonly held beliefs that all the people have. A code, which means a commonly held morals or restrictions, like restrictions to diet. Cult in this case is kind of a weird one because, of course, we think of Scientology and stuff like this. But really what it means is culture, or it means to worship. And another part of that is it's not just worshiping like a god. It could be giving reverence to something. And that something could be a person, could be reverence to a place or a thing or an idea, which is just the definition of a noun. After that, community, there needs to be some kind of weekly services and what are called life cycle events. That means weddings, funerals, and so forth. And then clergy, which is simply, the leaders. And why this is outdated is because this checklist of 5, boxes, some groups that are not considered religions may actually check more boxes than some groups that are religions. And so this becomes a very problematic definition because this is not what a definition of religion is. There's more to it. So when you come across a non-religious group that has 4 or 5 of these boxes checked, what do you do with religious groups that only have 2 or 3 of these? And so it just became too problematic. So by the 1990s, when I was learning about it in high school, we were only learning about it because it was a thing of the past. I also want to make a Scientology connection here. In the 1970s, someone must have informed L. Ron Hubbard that this was that religious scholars had put this list together, because shortly after this list became a thing in the 70s, L. Ron Hubbard wrote the creed of a Scientologist, the code of a Scientologist. He then put the 8th dynamic together, which is the Supreme Being. He then started to have Sunday services. He then wrote weddings and funerals and birth ceremonies. And then he started ordaining reverends, which, by the way, in the 1970s, wore long black robes, had a priest collar, and had a large necklace with a Scientology 8-pointed cross. So I'm pretty sure that somebody somewhere said, L. Ron Hubbard, look at these 5 things. This is what religion is now. And he decided, okay, well, I got some stuff to do, but just note that it was over 2 decades, and Scientology had none of these things until 1 year in the 70s. Now, okay, sorry, this is now my second last slide. So what do all religions have in common? Okay. This is something that religious scholars ask, right? What do we have in common? Well, is it God or gods? Again, yes, if they're theistic religions, then religions have gods, but there are non-theistic religions. Prayer is also very interesting. Probably most religions have some form of prayer, but does it mean that everyone who prays has to be religious? That question is usually no. There are people that might be spiritual, even secular, that might pray or have some form of prayer. So it's not necessarily a requirement. Rituals, again, rituals probably, again, is one of the things that may connect some religions, but some people are heavy on the rituals and some are light on the rituals as far as religions go. Houses of worship. What's interesting about this is, yeah, we think of most, churches and mosques and temples and synagogues, but I mentioned the Rastafarians before. Rastafarians do not have houses of worship. And there are lots of religious groups that meet in people's homes. So it's not necessarily something that has to be a religion. And then founders. This is an interesting one. Hinduism does not have a single founder. Shintoism does not have a single founder. Okay, most pagan and indigenous spiritual groups do not have founders. So, for example, if we're talking about the ancient Greek religion, Homer was not the founder of the ancient Greek religion. Hindus came to be when a group called the Indo-Aryan people, and I know Aryan is a weird word because it was misused by Hitler, but they were a people called Indo-Aryans that left the Caucasus and migrated to the Indus Valley. In the Indus Valley, there were a group of people there. They had gods, and the Indo-Aryan people had gods. They combined them. That's Hinduism. Same thing happened with Shintoism. So in some cases, there's a marrying between multiple religions and multiple spiritual practices without a single founder. Finally, religion is complicated, and this is for better or for worse in some cases. So that is really what religious studies in the end teaches. It teaches that all religions have actually very few things in common, while there is certain overlap between certain religions, like the Abrahamic religions of Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, or what they call the Dharmaic religions, which is Hinduism, Jainism, Sikhism, Buddhism. Yes, they have a lot of overlap. However, there's also a lot of differences in history, differences in culture, in practices, and so on. The main point to take away from today's presentation is that there is no archetype definition of what is a religion. So we cannot point to the Catholics or the Protestants or the Hindus or whatever and say that is a religion, because they differ from another religion differently, okay? And so the unfortunate part, and this is where Scientology comes to it, is that if the group says that they're a religion, then they're a religion. And so it doesn't matter what the group believes. It doesn't even matter what the group does. In most cases in the Western world, if a group says they're a religion, somewhere on earth, some government is going to give them a recognition. Now, in Scientology, we just had a thing, of course, with England, that they're not considered a religion in Canada, but of course they are in other places. And so really it is a complicated situation. So when we generalize and we say, well, all religions are the same, or all religions are not the same, it's just too far of a definition. All religions are true, all religions are false. Again, that's not the point of religious studies. Okay, the point of the religious studies is to try to find some commonality, but also to appreciate the differences because it is complicated. And with that, that is my last slide, and I hope everyone enjoyed the presentation. I thank everyone for their attention. I hope I didn't go too far over what I wanted to do as time-wise. I hope I was okay on that. I tried to time it out around 40 minutes. I think I might have done that, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, again, thank you so much, and I'm definitely up for questions. I want to go back to my channel just to see what's going on here. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Before we take any questions, I would like to beseech all of you as now being members of the Church of Steve-O. So
Nice.
Amen.
I identify as a church, therefore I am a church.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Sadly, unfortunately, but that's what it is in America, at least. Yeah.
I don't know if anybody has seen or heard Chris Shelton's podcast this week that dropped today with Apostate Alex, and Alex has been doing a fantastic job looking through the finances of Scientology in Europe in general, but especially in the UK. And they talked about that. They talked about the differences of between like what makes it a religion, what makes it a charity. Like this, it's very confusing, but they talk about that, and it's very, very interesting. If anybody's interested in that, highly recommend it.
Yeah, that's one of those things where England will have a much different definition than the US. It's much harder to become a religious organization in England and Canada than it is in the United States. And I think it has to do very much with the founding of the United States. And again, going back to those Puritans, they were bossing everyone around in England to the point where people got sick of them. And they went to the Netherlands, bought a ship, the Mayflower, and they went all the way over to, I guess, what is today Virginia, I guess, or somewhere around there, North Carolina. I can't remember now where, I guess. And they started their thing, and they were religious refugees, and they were kind of fanatics in some ways. And unfortunately, that culture is still around in American religion. It's just a sad thing that fundamentalism is really a mainstay in America because of those early founders being that they had to leave, and being that they were so isolated when they came here, and being the fact that they were just, held in together in this tight-knit community. And whereas in Europe, I mean, yeah, they went through tons and tons of religious issues, but of course, now religion in Europe, it's definitely, I would say, more liberal in some ways than certainly in America. It's a lot more conservative, which means more open in certain places in Europe, whereas it's less open in places in America. And those are cultural differences as well. So it just really makes it a bad thing if you're in America and you're not a Christian or you don't have a religious affiliation. There's definitely stigma and things like this that go on, which don't happen in Europe, at all. So it's very, very sad to that kind of cultural, stigma of non-Christians and non-religious people. And it's awful. Hopefully it'll change one day, but who knows?
Tatiana has a good comment here. Very culty beginnings to the USA.
Yes. Very much.
So, Mark, do you want to take some comments and questions from the start section?
Absolutely.
All right. So this was a little while ago, but we were starring things as you went along. Selena Keimauer says, religious studies was compulsory in my school. We looked at all the major religions as well as some smaller ones and a bit about cults. And I want to tag another comment on because this is something the opposite, which is interesting. Lene, religious studies was not allowed in my school. No prayer or pledge of allegiance or to flag either. So you got two very, I'm not sure, whether it's different countries. Selena is from
Ireland.
I can't remember. Ireland.
Yeah.
And Lene, I'm not sure if she's.
I believe she is from the United States.
United States. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I wanted to ask you guys.
There might have been a private school. Yeah, there may have been a private school where, I mean, there are private schools in the United States that are, of course, run by religions, but there are very secular private schools that you don't have to have a pledge of allegiance. So,
I'd like to ask you guys what
you have to have it.
Yeah, Pledge of Allegiance is something that's very, I don't know. For me, it's very American. That's the idea that I have of it. But I'd like to ask you guys, I was curious when I read that now, and those two comments were very interesting. And I'm thinking of like my education. I went to Catholic school, so private Catholic school. So I had religious studies, but where I went to high school, I actually had a more liberal, I'd say, religion teacher, because all my religion classes were like teaching Catholicism, right? So it was pretty much that. And then in high school, I had a teacher who did something that was not quite religious studies, but she allowed us to be more I don't know how to, what's the word, to explore more. So I remember that for example, we had to had a project that she separated the whole class in like pairs, and then each pair had to research a different religion of the world. So we would be aware of all different things that exist, like, or at least somebody would be interested, which I thought was very interesting. So I was curious about what your guys' experiences were. Did you have religious studies at school, or what's your...
In elementary school and high school, no. The closest we got to religion was, where it was touched on in history or sociology or those courses, but there was no specific religion courses. That really came to be in college, at university, was really where we were able to go, I want to take a religious studies course, or I want to, major in theology or whatever the case may be.
Elective.
So, yeah, electives, or that could be, that could be somebody's major for sure.
Or major, of course, but not in school.
No, not in primary school, not in high school. In college, I went to a school that had a unique, maybe not overly unique, but a geography where it was just a couple blocks away from a Lutheran college. And so we did, I don't know if it was called course sharing or what it was. I could go to that school, just walk a couple blocks and go and take courses at that school. And fulfill my electives and my whatnots for college. But no, I think it's pretty common in the U.S. that public schools, you don't see much of a religious education.
I even would like to know if here, because I'm sure here in Brazil, probably public schools probably don't have it either, but it's because I went to private Catholic schools.
Right.
So, that's why I'm curious about everybody's background.
Right.
Yeah. Same with me as with Steve-O. Nothing really, or similarly, nothing really in middle school or high school, and I didn't take any religious studies classes in college.
Yeah, they didn't have anything specific in the schools that I attended, but there were some references. You study religious freedom and things like when you study about the Pilgrims and all that, you kind of get a little bit of that. But I think there were religious overtones that kind of waned as I got older, and I think that society changed. And I went to school in the 70s and 80s, so in the 70s, I think it was more acceptable to bring religion and teachers to be able to talk about what their faith was. And then by the time I reached high school, it was very much a no-no. And then I substituted, and actually while I was in the cult, I had a part-time job for a little while substituting in some public schools, and you weren't allowed to mention it at all. So I think it could be a cultural / progressive thing where it got less and less and less acceptable to even say if you were Catholic or Baptist or whatever. It really was discouraged. So that was my experience.
What about you, Mark?
For me, I grew up in the province of Ontario, and what's really interesting about Ontario is we actually have publicly funded Catholic school board, and then we have the publicly funded public school board. And in the Catholic school board, they have Catholic religious classes throughout elementary and high school, so K-8 and then 9 through 12. There are options to take world religion courses in the Catholic schools, but mostly it's, through the K through 12, it's to prepare, Catholics for confirmation. For me, again, I went to public school. My mom was a public school teacher, and, we were very much for public education. And throughout, throughout K to K8, so elementary school, religion, nothing. But we had option again in the 9th grade and also 10th grade to take world religion courses, 1 and 2. So world religions 1 and 2, I took both of them. And the first, world religions 1 dealt mainly with Western religions, and then 2 dealt mainly with the Eastern religions. In college in Canada, there was a class on a specialized class on religion in the media, because I took a broadcasting program, but I don't think I took that course. And then it really wasn't until when I was 26, 27, and 28, when I was in the US, that I fulfilled, some of my elective courses when I was at Santa Monica College, community college, junior college, that I took philosophy, religion, religious studies, and things like this. And then when I was an undergrad, the university I went to in Canada had a religious studies faculty, but I was studying history. However, we some history courses. I took a history course on what's called diaspora studies. So there's a lot of people like the Jewish community, Armenians, and so forth, who have been living in diaspora for a long time. It means that they've been living outside of their indigenous homeland for thousands or hundreds of years. That definitely touches on religion, but not explicitly a religious course. Wasn't like the study of Christianity or something. But when I learned about I mentioned also before a couple of weeks ago, I did take a class or a course on the history of Spanish and Portuguese colonialism in North and South America, rather. Not North America was French and English, but in South America. And I did learn. I actually learned more about Catholicism in that class than I did my whole life. I also learned a lot about the differences of the monastic orders and how some were more pro-colonial and some were against it. The Dominicans, for whatever reason, were very, very anti-colonial. They did not like what they saw with the indigenous peoples. So yeah, and we were introduced to certain concepts. I also, and this just has nothing to do with education, but just being a complete outsider, there is a wonderful, wonderful horror show on Netflix called The Midnight Mass, which is incredible, from Mike Flanagan. And I probably learned more about Catholicism from that than I ever thought. And I was like, wow, this is actually kind of a little bit like Judaism in some ways. It's very heavy ritualistic. But, for me, learning about religions, either from classes or whatever, and then, little things from media or from other places. But I'm actually very glad that I took these religion courses. They were electives in high school. One of the things that's very tough is that I'm sure that there are countries in the world that have religious courses. Maybe they're mandatory or not. I think in the United States, it would be so difficult if some president made a decree that said, okay, we're going to make, a religious literacy course mandatory through all 50 states, because someone somewhere will fuck it up for everyone else. Like some teacher will take that as, oh, I can preach the Bible to my students, and that'll just go south. And it's so sad, because I think of a lot of different places where in the United States, and it's not just for religions, it's for like even just different non-religious people, just to have like, hey, this is what it means, this is not what it means. And I think it's just too political in certain areas in the United States. Like, hey, there's some people who just don't believe in God. They're not evil, they just don't believe, and that's okay. And then there's some people who dress differently from you and worship a different God from you, and hey, that's okay too, because of these reasons. But I just have this fear that in the United States, which generally I think needs a lot more religious literacy, as we all do, by the way, but someone somewhere will screw it up, and it'll just turn out to be a horrible thing. And that's really the problem, where it's something that needs to be taught in elementary school, but I don't think it ever will, because of the potential of someone to just screw everything up,
A good point.
Joe DeCepo said, I had religious studies at school. It's mandatory in the UK. Same country as Selena. Yeah, same situation.
Wow. That's incredible.
And this is interesting too. And Sophia says, in Germany, the government regulates religious studies and the religion has to agree to not indoctrinate to be taught. I love the scientific level of debate that we had in school already. That's interesting too.
Very cool. It's very
Who's
cool.
gonna not agree to not indoctrinate? Who's gonna go, oh no, yeah, we must indoctrinate people to teach them the way. It just, I mean, I trust the German government. They have come a long way and have had some issues that have required them to do things. So I understand that, and I'm sure that on paper it's deeper, but yeah, it's just funny that that phrasing that oh yeah, no, we must indoctrinate our patriot, our whatever, our parishioners. So, but
Our
yeah, anyway,
students.
our students,
Our
right?
children.
Think of the children.
Well, I believe the children are our future.
Yep.
Teach them well and let them lead the way.
Show them all the beauty they possess inside. Give them a sense
Give
of pride.
them a sense of pride. Okay. Anyways, sorry about that. Steve-O and I were bad. We're bad for each other.
So
Evelyn Lee.
I disagree.
Evelyn Lee Barney. I'm so old. You're not old. That the pledge, a prayer, or psalm, which is a form of prayer, was how we began every day. I'm actually grateful to have learned certain common cultural references that way. That's interesting.
when my mom went to school, she was born just after the war. They had prayer. They had the Lord's Prayer in public schools, and of course, they ended that in the 1960s. But that was part of the generation for a very long time in Canada. I mean, in a public school, they had the Lord's Prayer. Like, that's bizarre for me, but it's what they had, you know.
I had a homeroom teacher in high school. The first high school I went to was a vocational school. My teacher that I had, in the beginning of the day was actually a Pentecostal. She was one of my best friend's mothers, and she went to our crazy church. This was before I ran away and then ended up coming back into a cult. But she would slip references to God and things, and she demanded that everybody say the Pledge of Allegiance and have a moment of prayer, or she called it moment of silence. So that was like her way of kind of slipping that in. But she would kind of say, we're like under God, indivisible. And I remember there was a girl, her name was Francine. That's all I remember. I don't remember anything else about her, but she was a Jehovah's Witness. And she would have to leave every morning and sit in the hallway every time we'd say the Pledge of Allegiance. So that's, kind of what I remember from any type of religious reference in high school. But like I said, it got less and less, especially as I went to another completely secular high school. But isn't it interesting though that something that Evelyn brought up was being grateful to having that cultural reference to kind of think back on. I think that's one thing that religion provides, is that feeling of comfort or familiarity or connection with a group of people. Like, oh, where did I come from? That's probably why religion is spawned, because the ancient Greeks, the ancient philosophers, everybody just looked at the sky, and the Aborigines, all kinds of native populations, looked around and said there's got to be something bigger than us. So they kind of contrived their own beliefs and passed them down to generations. Wouldn't you think, Mark?
Yeah, of course. I mean, everyone is trying to find out why we're here, except if you're a complete misanthropic nihilist, and you just don't care. But even those people, need to have a community. There's definitely, what we learn in religious studies is the difference between religion and religious expression. So even just an expression of something, right? So you're right. So imagine you're in the Horn of Africa 200,000 years ago. You're like, part of a new species. You don't even know what that species is, but you're a Homo sapien. And, you look up in the sky, you spent your day, trying not to get eaten by, by other animals. And then you kind of look up at the sky and you think, wow, this is really big. I mean, it's the reason why we don't just have religion, but it's the reason why we have science and philosophy. Right. And and sociology and like and to me it's not a competition, right? Like everything that is a thing can contribute in some ways, maybe not equally, maybe there are some things that do it better than others, but everything contributes in some way to something larger. So to me it's not like one versus the other. It's like knowledge is just knowledge, and that's sort of part of the thing. Like, yes, knowledge is knowledge and knowledge is everywhere, and for over 200,000 years people are trying to figure it out. I don't think we'll ever figure it out for sure. There'll always be things that we will never know, in my opinion. I don't believe that science has all the answers and will have all the answers, but it has a lot of great answers, to a lot of
Agreed.
problems that we're facing. But it's not a religion, so it's not going to solve everything. But that's also okay, because we're human, and there needs to be some mystery in life, or else what's the point?
And we're limited in being
There's
human
literally
too.
nothing to do.
And in being human,
Yeah.
we're limited too.
Everyone
it's
is,
not
yeah.
like, this is something that I used to think about even back when I was still religious. I started thinking like, well, if there is a God, it's probably nothing that we can even begin to comprehend because we're limited. So we try to understand God through our, human limitations and perspective,
Yep.
And everybody believes in old bearded guys. So God is an old bearded man.
That's true.
Up in
So
the
is
clouds.
Santa Claus.
Santa Claus is too. Absolutely.
Santa Claus is
Makes sense.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll never forget when my youngest was I don't know how old he was, probably 9 or 10. He was like, "So, Mom, if Santa isn't real, is Jesus real?" And I was like, and we had left the cult a few years ago, and I was like, that's a really good question. I didn't have an answer to that, but it's a very good question.
Wow.
Oh,
Mark,
did we
don't
lose
leave
Mark?
us.
Oh no.
No. Joe tells us the Buddhist symbol is called the Dharma Chakra, meaning wheel of teaching.
Wow.
Mhm.
Aaron says beards make you seem legit.
Darn tootin'. Absolutely.
Yeah, true. Very true.
Absolutely. Beards are legit. I was gonna say
God has
the Buddhists have the Dharma Chakra, and then there's that other the spin-off religion that has the Greg chakra. So there's the Dharma and Greg
Dharma
chakras.
and Greg.
Yeah.
Dharma and Greg of Scientology, though, so no.
Just Dharma.
Okay, so Greg is Buddhist.
Greg went to
Dharma is Scientologist.
Criminal Minds and then got fired for like punching somebody. So
Oh, really?
yeah.
Oh,
Internet
still not good.
Mhm.
technologies.
We got you.
It's all
And
awesome.
Joe also said, God is a man. Here, let me pull this out.
God is a man, absolutely. A man with a beard. Because only a man
There's
can
only
have
a
up
man
the
who
world
can
this
fuck up
much.
the world this much. There you
You're
go.
right, Joe. You're right.
Yeah.
Yikes. Where
Let's
did Mark
see
go?
here.
He's
I'm
back. He's back.
He's back.
So it's just crappy here. I mean, it's Saturday
No.
nights. Everyone's online, probably in my building, and who knows what else. But I'm here. If
That
I
is a very
disappear,
good
I
thing.
always try to come back.
Very
All
good.
right. Awesome.
What else do we have there?
All right. Selena Kaimauer. Mine is a little slow too because I click on it and then it takes like 3 seconds to come up.
So is mine.
She said learning about religions was an important part of learning how to be a citizen in a multicultural and multi-faith country. I don't understand not learning about religions. That's a very good point. It's a very good point because it is part of culture and identity and social practices and everything.
Sorry, guys. Again,
And I find it very interesting.
That's all
very
right. We'll
interesting
bear
that
with
you
it.
have this opportunity to.
All right. I'm back
you
again.
know. Hey, that's okay. We'll keep
Yeah.
adding you. I think it's
but-
very interesting that people like Selena that had the opportunity to have that. And I think that would be amazing if more people could have that, But I think to Mark's point earlier, that somebody is gonna fuck it up for everybody else. So
Yeah.
Right.
It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. It really doesn't matter. Like, there's just something about people, right? Like, I don't know. The word like human nature is definitely maybe not a thing. Who knows? But certainly there's a part of being human where like we're just so many multiple personalities. It's one of the
Yeah,
reasons why
yeah.
like utopian communities don't work out past
Bo.
2 years.
Hey,
Hey,
Poe.
So, oh hey Pope.
Good to see you, Poe.
Why like utopian communities don't work out, or like communes and stuff don't really work out, is
Yeah.
because of power. Power is a big thing that people want and they seek after, and there's all these different personalities, narcissists and psychopaths, and there's nothing we can really do about it except, the society that we have, at least, a democratic society, a pluralistic society, seem to work out pretty well. But then there's always people in those societies that are screwing it up for the rest of everyone else too. So
Yes.
who knows?
Absolutely.
I just want everybody to imagine Steve Britton wearing a short cheerleading skirt.
Oh, thanks a lot,
Pom-poms.
Steve-O.
Done
Thank you.
and done. And I mean done.
Done.
Anyways, Joe said, and before anyone else says it, the Jainism symbol is not what you think. It dates back way
Yeah.
before certain 20th century German ideology co-opted it. And she also
100%.
added, it's also facing the opposite way. Right. As soon as I saw
That's
that, I did have that question. So thank you for clarifying that, Joe.
And has little dots
Correct.
in it too, but
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the swastika, of course, is a symbol. It's actually a symbol of peace, also in Hinduism and Buddhism. Adolf Hitler took it because there was a secret society called the Trula Society, which was a very anti-Semitic, racist secret society in Germany in the 19 teens and 20s. And they had something similar to a swastika. What he also did is he inverted it. And when you invert something like that, like a symbol of peace, you essentially make it part of the opposite. So he had his own reasons for using the swastika, but it obviously has nothing to do with Buddhism, Jainism, Hinduism, or any other, religion that uses it. It's just, as Joe mentioned, it's co-opted, it's appropriated, and it's very sad. It's very tragic that
Does
And
it
he had
have?
to choose that.
Go
I
ahead.
was just going to ask, does it have anything to do with the cross? Because, I was taught, who knows, this is probably totally bogus, but in, the fundamental Christian circles, it's often said that the swastika was like a bent cross, like a twisted version of Christianity. And that's why, but I'm sure that's not the case, but thought I'd just throw that out there for, the
Interesting.
trivia.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I
it
don't
is
know.
interesting.
Yeah. Could be.
And I think
I'm
it's
not
in,
sure.
yeah, I wouldn't know. I think it's interesting that whenever a symbol or a word or something changes or gets co-opted or something like that, if it's strong enough, like which was the case with the swastika, it's like no matter what the original or the other symbol is, it's not like you can go around and parade that and just like just like if I were to get one of those and just go around. Some people do that, and you just go around and say no, but it's a peace symbol, just to try to force that into people's minds. You can't really revert, the popular idea, the idea that people have about it. It's just like the word gay, like some people say, oh no,
Mhm.
something's so gay. And then it's something like, no, but gay means happy. Like, okay, not anymore. It doesn't.
Yeah,
It
things do
may in the
change.
dictionary, but yeah.
Depends in what context, right?
It depends on what context exactly, but then you know what I mean. Like some people try to force using these things in some situations just to say, "Oh, but this is the original symbol," because you want to get back to that. But you can't really force it back into that when something like changes socially throughout history, such as happens with language and symbols and all of that. So it's kind of sad, like you said, because they co-opted it and it's so strong that I don't know if you can ever not have that association.
Yeah, I mean, when most people will look at it, they will think of Nazism, which again is really tragic because it predates it by thousands of years
Yeah.
and means something
Yeah.
completely different. But that symbol has been etched in
Not
our
anymore.
brains through our education. So
Yeah.
it is sad.
the Jen rides.
Yeah.
Very good.
Very good point, Sophia. You don't have to believe something to study it. Research is just about understanding the concept. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mary, you're muted.
Oh, I just realized that. Sorry. I'm glad Steve-O. See,
They saved you.
he's
See?
my
There was a pause
Really?
there.
we're
My Aaron,
Siamese.
my Aaron, dead air was getting to me. So
Yeah, so he read it while I was like
Right.
that.
I read it in your lips.
Joe says, fun fact. We like fun facts around here.
Mhm.
The founder of, what's the pronunciation, you linguist
The
people?
Baha'i faith. Baha'i faith.
Bah- Baha'i faith said a universal language would create peace, and some of his followers learned Esperanto, but then he refused to help Zamenhof's
Yeah.
daughter flee the Holocaust.
Yeah,
So
Esperanto
universal
is a really
language.
cool. Joe, you have to ask me the question whether or not you speak Esperanto. There's on Wikipedia, not on Wikipedia, excuse me, on Duolingo. There's a Esperanto, and there's also a couple Esperanto communities here in Budapest. For some reason, Hungarians of a certain generation were all over Esperanto. And apparently, a couple of my family members that were very radically left wing also spoke Esperanto. So I've learned a little bit of it. It is so easy if you speak English or a Romance language. It is like, I love it for the fact that it is so simple. So I don't know if you speak Esperanto, but that is correct.
I speak both. I speak
Zamenhof was a Polish Jewish optometrist, constructed the language. And the Baha'i faith, they believe in what's called an auxiliary language that will unite all of humanity. And a lot of people thought that should be Esperanto. So maybe it will be. Who knows? Maybe we'll be speaking Esperanto in the future. But seems like English. Yes, I speak Esperanto. Oh, interesting. I forget now how to say hello. Saluton? Saluton? Maybe you can figure it out, Joe. Saluton.
I was actually on one of Joe's
Mi
live
estas
streams the
Mar-
other day,
Mi
and
estas
she was with
Marco?
somebody they were both like reading. They were just having fun, and I was like, "What's happening? What language is that?" She said Esperanto. I'm like, "Oh, cool."
I love that. That
So what's
is
the-
so cool.
So what's the history behind? I mean, there was that decision or that idea of this Esperanto to be this universal language. Did it have any merit to be the universal language? Like, is it like one of the first things ever spoken, or?
No. So it was constructed after, Joe, let us know, World War I or World War II. I think it was one of those two wars.
It is that young. Okay.
One of the reasons why Esperanto didn't take off is because it's very inherently a European-based language. Esperanto is very, very easy for those who speak Romance languages, Germanic languages, or Slavic languages. So it's very European. Much like how Swahili was also developed, although Swahili comes from what's called Bantu languages, as it's not constructed. But Swahili was actually founded as a way to connect Southeast Africans, Arabic, and a whole bunch of different cultures together. And also they tried to use it to unite all of the African countries, okay? And there have been others, other things like that throughout history. But it was basically essentially constructed from scratch, and that was the idea. But one of its faults was that it is too European. So if you don't really speak a Germanic, Slavic, or a Romance language, it can be just as difficult to learn other. However, one of the interesting things about the grammar is that it is literally super, super easy because it's extremely consistent. So, for example, estas, right? Mi estas Mark. I am Mark. I think that's what it means. Joe, you always please correct me. But estas is the same for everything. Like when you conjugate a verb, estas, it's like the same thing.
That's
Laboras is
beautiful.
for to work. It's the same exact thing. So like in Hungarian, we have 6 pronouns. We have 6 conjugations. And then we also have definite and indefinite. So some verbs literally have 12 conjugations. That's why Hungarian is hard.
Wow.
Really freaking hard. But most languages in English we have mainly 2, right? I go, you go, goes, go, right? But in Esperanto, and then Esperanto has like different kinds of things that just endings that make things just super, super easy. But again, that easiness is relative to if you already speak a European language. I wish we all kind of spoke a universal language, but right now that universal language is probably English. English is becoming the international quote unquote lingua franca of the world. While not everyone speaks English and can speak English and has the resources to speak English, it is possible to find English speakers in every single country on earth today. And I think why with English that Esperanto also may not have had an advantage is that we also have media, we have culture, we have our movies, we have our famous TV shows. Like, I don't think there are many, there might be movies that are in Esperanto and stuff, but it can't compete to English. Books and stuff like that as well, yeah.
They speak English on Star Trek, am I right?
Of course.
You're right. I know you did it.
It's funny. I was just thinking, wouldn't it be hilarious if Captain Kirk and Jean-Luc Picard were walking around speaking Esperanto?
Maybe that's your calling to make that episode.
But in the later series, they had the translators, so that no matter what language the aliens were speaking. Right. But it reminds me of how many of you? I think you had some religious background in some way when you were younger, all of you, right? The story of the Tower of Babel or Babel.
Mm-hmm,
I call it Babel because it's like kind of apropos for the story, and it kind of fits the story. But it was they were building this tower pillar up to God so they could reach God, right? And people spoke the same language, so they could say, hey, throw me a plank or whatever, right? And then God came down and just mixed up all the languages, and that's how we have different languages now. So they couldn't understand each other, so they couldn't build this big tower up to God or reach God and become like this unified big force. So yeah, that was my understanding of the story of the Tower.
There is actually a phenomenon that does happen when multiple groups of people who speak different languages come together, and it's called a pidgin. So if we think of an island nation, like if we think of Haiti, for example. So Haiti during colonial times, or Santo Domingo, but Haiti specifically, they had people who spoke French. They had people who spoke, I think it's Carib or Taino, which is an indigenous language. And then sadly and very tragically, they did have a lot of West African slaves. When they all got to Haiti, they had to speak a language. So they created what they call a pidgin. And it was a very minimalistic way of communicating with each other. They had to do it by survival. Then that pidgin, whatever it was, eventually became people's first languages. And that first language today is Haitian Creole. So whenever you think of a Creole, and if Marcus is here, Marcus is usually around. There's a Creole in Louisiana. You're not in today, but there is a Creole in Louisiana. Yeah. And there's one in Aruba, and there's tons throughout Africa. So all of those Creole languages began with people who just were in this really effed up situation in some cases, but they had to point to something and say, well, you need to build something. So this is that, this is that, this is that. And it's kind of remarkable that people can do this. It's, where people might speak 5 or 6 or 10 different languages. And eventually through osmosis and through time, human beings will find a way to communicate with each other. It's just remarkable, I think. Again, despite these horrible circumstances. Yeah, despite the tragedy of these situations.
Paul made the comment.
I just wanted to add something to the...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Poe said he usually has no problems communicating when he travels internationally. So agreeing with that, except in France, where they specifically speak French at you just so they don't have to admit that they know English, because they're snobby French people.
That's why.
That's funny.
That's why. Snobby French people. There you go.
Wow, Steve.
I'm sorry. What were you going to say, Juliana? I don't think there are any French people in the chat today. So snobby French people.
Wow,
those are Steve-O words.
Wow,
that's right.
I'm not
going to offend them by using the.
He just lost 1.03 subscribers.
They
of those
say,
green four-legged animals that they're often called. I'm not
they
gonna
say
do that.
Americans are stupid, don't they?
They do. They do. Yeah. See, Poe knows. Poe knows. Yeah, that's right. So
Oh,
I'm
yes,
sorry.
and the
Before Juliana shares, Chad, is anyone hungry for a calzone?
Chad, Chad. You know, I
Oh,
bet
that's-
Griff is.
That sounds good right now.
Because-
I'm sorry, Juliana. What were you going to say before we derailed the train?
Forget. That's okay.
No.
You can go. I have ADHD. You can go back to the start comments if you want. I think Helicopter is going to be on with Doug soon,
Oh, that's right.
and
Yeah.
I think some people are going to want to go watch that. So maybe.
Yeah, I promised Kelly I wouldn't miss her live. So sorry, guys. I'm going to have to dip soon just
okay.
because she's supported me from, minute one. I won't say day one, minute one. So,
Yeah.
and about 2 hours is about all I can sit still on a Saturday afternoon. I'll be
No
mopping the
worries.
floors and listening to her. So, but this has been fascinating. I really hope we do more and carry on. But I'm gonna say
I'm going to
Say bye
catch
All
for
right,
them
now.
on
sure.
Might be a good mark.
Bye,
I
Marilyn.
guys.
Yep.
Thanks.
see you later.
Have a
Bye-bye.
good one.
to
Bye,
TMI
Aaron.
everybody. I have to pee, so we'll see you guys.
Are you leaving? What's happening?
Oh, are we not leaving? I thought. Okay, I'll hold it in.
I don't know. I thought we were going to finish the start.
Let's do a few more
comments and
starts
questions.
and then
Oh, God, if we got
switch up to-
stars, yeah. No. I'm
Fine.
sorry. I did not mean to be. I did not mean to be a French person there. Yes, let's continue on.
I thought we were going to finish the start questions. And
Yeah.
I just wanted to,
Because you're
I knew Marilyn was
Steve
going
is
to be there for.
Steve was implying that we were quitting, so that's why it was your association with the French is that we were all going to quit. And so, as someone who's learned French in school, just I have nothing to say because I don't remember French. But if I remembered the French, I would curse at you in French, and it would be Quebecois French, so that it would
course
be
it would
even
be.
more strange and weird.
Right. I just had a
But yeah, let's
thought,
do a couple more, and then if we can see where we go. And next week we'll do the theological stances, and we'll go the week after. We'll do some other stuff and things like that. So, which I always look forward to. I love doing these PowerPoints. They're so cool, fun
Oh,
for me.
that's
It's
great.
a
Yeah,
nice
it's
outlet
great.
for me to nerd.
I love learning. It's like
Yeah,
I'm in
no, it's
class,
fun.
but in a, yeah.
Viva la
Awesome.
Charles de Gaulle. Let's see what's next.
Do you want to?
Oh, am I? Yeah, I do.
I don't know. I'm asking because I know you.
Sorry. Okay. Steve Britton, the Nerdy Bunch. Scientology spawned the Nerdy Bunch.
Not wrong.
Thanks, Steve.
Yep.
Creepy P5 says, I feel there's a common thread about all religions and Scientology doesn't fit.
Yeah, pretty much. Not wrong there.
Oh, this is interesting. Evelyn Lee Barney says, there are, as I understand it, more Jews in the USA than in Israel.
I think there's slightly more. I think there's something like 6.5 Jewish people in Israel and like close to 7 in America. But then also there are lots of people with dual citizenship. So there is an overlap.
Oh, there. That makes sense. That makes sense too. They had to change the legal definition of religious worship in the UK because it previously said you needed a god to qualify.
Wow.
Yeah. There is a very interesting case when I was in college. So this is in the early 2000s. The state of Texas wanted to revoke tax exempt status from all religions that didn't have an espoused belief in God. So Buddhists, ethical culture societies, Unitarians, and others went to the ACLU and they sued the state of Texas, and they won. And so that's why having an espoused belief in God is not necessarily a requirement to be a religion.
Interesting.
Here's a question from Creepy. Do the different denominations of Jewish religions accept each other?
For the most part, yes. So the three major religions are Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, and the three minor religions or minor movements are called Reconstructionist, Renewal, and Humanistic. It generally is the case that the Orthodox community tends to be the most dogmatic. So if somebody converts to any of those other denominations, it's generally not recognized by the Orthodox community. So the Orthodox community also has a lot of diversity. There's modern Orthodox, there's ultra-Orthodox, there's the Hasidics, I could go on. However, there are also Orthodox movements that are becoming more open and more progressive, interestingly enough, that are coming out of the modern movement that are much more tolerant and open to connections between the other movements. But there's a lot of squabbling. So, for example, up until just a few years ago, someone who was Jewish, unless they were born from a Jewish mother, and they, went to synagogue regularly, you could not really immigrate to Israel. Especially, it was also difficult for those that came from U.S. groups or progressive groups and liberal groups that had a woman as a rabbi. That's changed now. So if someone converts to at least the Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox movement, you can immigrate to Israel. And that, again, is all about this Orthodox dogmatic nonsense that they have over the state, which is a whole issue that is very political that I don't want to get into, because I do love Israel, but there's a lot of stuff I don't like about Israel, and this is one of the. There's a lot of stuff, but this is one of the issues: is the Orthodox influencing the government, and again also treatment of other minorities and people, whether they're Jewish or not, Palestinians, etc. But that's the current government. I am not a fan of, but the current government likes the votes of the Orthodox community, and so they give them what they want. And it's unfortunate, very sad and very tragic. But thankfully, there was a reform. So if someone converts to a non-Orthodox denomination, you can immigrate to Israel. Because why the hell not? You're still Jewish. It's really only the Orthodox that are so out of their minds that they think that, you're either Jewish or you're not Jewish. And Jewish means you accept everything. And if you're not Jewish, you accept nothing. Again, black and white, fundamentalist, dogmatic thinking. I cannot stand it. And that's my soapbox I will get off of right now. Yeah.
Well, along the same lines, but different, Joni points out that she can say Utah's government is influenced by the LDS Church. So a lot of that overlap, and I know different countries. That's a different thing, or can be. But yeah, within the United States, very much a very big overlap between church and state, and or some would say cult and state in that case. Yeah.
Yeah, and I spent about a month one summer in Utah in 2011. It was awful. The alcohol content of liquor, especially beer, is only like 3%. Yeah. And if you go to a, I don't know, like a Chili's or something, like a restaurant, and you want to order alcohol, you have to order food. It's like the most backward, archaic nonsense. And even in Salt Lake City, which, by the way, is becoming less and less LDS as the years go by. I think when I was there, it was under 50% LDS. I think it sounds like 30% LDS. It's a great city, but I love Salt Lake City. It's a small city. It's very nice. Great public transportation system. But these archaic rules, and then I can't stand in the United States when you can't drink on a Sunday, can't buy alcohol on a Sunday. Like, come on, it's 2023. Like, get with it.
I heard, and this could be wrong, and I only have to walk up a mountain to essentially get to Utah. It's not that close, but I heard that a lot of especially in Salt Lake City, in and around Salt Lake City, a lot of things became a lot more flexible, liberal, whatever the right term is, with regards to things like alcohol and things like that. after the Olympics were there, or as the Olympics were there. I guess, you had people from different countries that were expecting to be able to, drink and rah their folks. I don't know if that's true in all locations, or and if some of it started to change back. I'm not sure. You're absolutely right. Salt Lake City is becoming much less and less LDS. But yeah, I heard that so ironically, a Mormon, Mitt Romney, was very responsible for bringing those Olympics to Salt Lake City, and then things started to become a lot less controlled by the church dogma when it came to. I don't know. I haven't been there. I haven't been there. Not sure. Actually, that's not true. I landed there once and then got on a plane and went to Cody, Wyoming. But
Saw the airport.
That's all. I saw the airport. That's a whole different story. Cody's a nice little town.
It's me in Texas too. I saw the airport of, I don't remember which city in Texas once.
Evelyn says, I know you don't have time to get into the weeds on this, Mark, but which groups is or is not theistic, particularly in Buddhism, is nuanced?
Yeah. So again, the Theravada Buddhism, so the Buddhism of Sri Lanka, Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar, and Thailand, generally they're called, of course, the School of the Elders. So in order to become enlightened, you kind of have to become a monk. And there's the oldest denomination. So the Buddha also taught about gods. I mean, when I was talking to you about the devas not being gods, being mortals, being imperfect, a lot of that stuff comes directly from the Buddha. So from Siddhartha Gautama, who of course was from India. He was a real person. He was a prince, and there's the whole story of him. It is nuanced, agreed. I completely agree, 100%. But Theravada Buddhism tends to be the most non-theistic. Then when we get into Mahayana Buddhism, so that's the Buddhism of Japan, of Korea, Vietnam, and China, this is when it does get we start to get into these differences, because there are definitely schools. There's something called Pure Land Buddhism, which exists in all of those countries I mentioned before. The quote unquote, we used to call them the Orient, right? We used to call the Oriental countries, but now we just call it's East Asia. So in China, in Japan, in Korea, and in Vietnam, they have this Pure Land Buddhism. Pure Land Buddhism is probably the most, I wouldn't say theistic in the sense, but they definitely have elements. So they definitely have more worship, more superstitions, and it is very nuanced, as you say. They don't look at the Buddhas necessarily as gods, but there's just different traditions that might lean more towards that. So they have been, in some cases, categorized as polytheistic, or sometimes called transtheistic. And again, please note that next week I'm going to go over some of these terms and what they mean, and I will associate and go over which one actually is good for Buddhism and Jainism and stuff like this, because it is nuanced. So just generally labeling Buddhism non-theistic is kind of the right category. But again, there's nothing that is there's no definition that really perfectly fits it, because again, as you mentioned, there's Mahayana Buddhism, especially Pure Land. There's a lot of differences there, and a lot of those influences of the quote unquote polytheistic nature, especially of Chinese Pure Land Buddhism, comes from Confucianism and comes from other, folk religions and stuff like this. So it's complicated. And again, I'll go through some of those more next week when we talk about, theological stance. The week after, we'll do what are called non-theistic views of God. And the week after that, we'll talk about secular philosophy. So we will get into things like atheism, agnosticism, humanism, and so forth. We'll do the whole thing, because why the heck not? It's a lot of learning. And yeah, you're absolutely correct. So I don't disagree with you. It's just when we talk about denominations, we are talking about nuances and weeds, and it can be a little complicated. But I do appreciate the question and the statement also, Evelyn. Thank you.
Steve, you're muted.
You're muted, Steve.
I was muted.
Yeah.
Chad, I never mute myself.
I know that's never happened before.
That's right.
I know you're right. I know you did it.
Sophia says, I actually wrote my first scientific paper on a specific part of the Catholic-based resistance against Nazis with the broader context of the Concordat
Yeah,
in 12th grade.
Yeah, to note, there were a couple thousand, both Catholic and Protestant clergy that were killed in concentration camps. So part of the larger, we might call it Holocaust or genocide, included at least, I think, 2,000 is the thing of Catholics. There's a very, very interesting man named Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was a Lutheran pastor, and he opposed the Nazis, and he was unfortunately taken to a concentration camp and killed. So there were a lot of Christians that were, and clergy specific, Catholics and Protestants that were, murdered during the Holocaust. And there were a lot of Christians are a part of a group of people called the Righteous Among Nations, which is something that the largest Holocaust museum in the world, called the Yad Vashem, which is in Jerusalem, and they have these Righteous Among Nations, and there are Muslims and those that without religious affiliation, but these were mainly people, non-Jews, that helped save Jewish people during the Second World War. So people who helped, if you know the Dyer Van Frank, the family that helped Anne Frank was Christian. There's a gentleman named Corrie ten Boom in the Netherlands who saved a lot of people who were Jewish, and my own grandfather was actually saved by a colonel in the army, and his name was Lajos. His first name, Guido Falvi, was his last name. He was Christian. He was from Transylvania. He married a Jewish woman, and he decided to train people like my grandfather, young Jewish men, to make them soldiers so they could defend certain areas in Budapest. And I'm just, this is why we need each other. It's not just about one group of people. It's it's a whole bunch. And again, I also want to mention there are Muslims. There were people in China that may have been Buddhists and so forth, and there were people who were atheists and had no religious affiliation that also are part of the Righteous Among Nations. So, this is the kind of the silver lining that you find in some of these horrible parts of history. There are still people who do good things.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Chad, could you drop a link for Witness's channel at Multichick? She just uploaded Leah's complaint reading. And look at that, you just did. At Multichick, check it out. Whitney is doing some fantastic readings on not just Leah's complaint, but a lot of the legal stuff that's going on. So I was going to say it's a fun channel. It's always hard to call a channel fun when these are the topics. But it's a great channel, so definitely like and subscribe. It's at Multichick. That's it. And Whitney will be waiting. So
I'll post
yeah, if you can put one up, that would be great. That would be wonderful. Jen Wright says, I'm about to leave, but about the languages, when I studied linguistics, I found it fascinating how much language affects worldview and thinking. And there's a part 2 to this. As in, multilingual people would answer the same questions differently based on the language they were using.
Mm-hmm.
So
that is very true. I think that reminds me of what I wanted to say earlier.
Good.
It was something about how I find it difficult I find it hard to believe that Esperanto would ever be a lingua franca because it's an artificial language, because language and culture are so connected, So I think to what Mark said earlier was that how English is so pervasive in culture all over the world through media, especially, that it just makes it easier, like, why do I speak English? Because it's important to know English, but then also I like to watch movies. I like to watch TV shows. I have all this contact with the cultural aspects of it, and they're very well connected. And that goes also to what she's saying here that people would answer the same question differently based on the same language they were using. So anybody who speaks more than one language, you'll know that sometimes you learn how to say something in the foreign language, and it works so well that you want to use it in your native language, and it doesn't work. So you have to, and you express things differently because there is a different feeling, a different way of seeing the world. It's very, very interesting how the view of the world, the culture, and languages are all connected. I find it fascinating.
I have a side question.
Oh, go
if you
for
don't
it.
mind, I have a side
Please.
question for you, Juliana. So when you go, I know you recently went to go see the Barbie movie. Do you have, like in Brazil, are there options to have a dub like in Portuguese and subtitles in English or vice versa? And then what do you
Yes.
prefer to choose? Like, what is your
Subtitled.
preference?
I've always liked subtitles.
And English subtitles? So you hear it
No,
in
subtitles
Portuguese
in
and
Portuguese. No, the
right,
opposite.
okay.
Original audio. For me, my preference
Yeah.
is original audio in original language, whatever the language is. But especially if it's English now, because I understand. Well, my mom has always liked movies a lot, right? And I've always watched movies, and I was a fast reader from when I started learning how to read. So it was a friend of mine and me were the two fastest readers when we were like, I don't know, 6, and we were the only ones that could actually read subtitles first. They're probably slow subtitles because we were young, but I remember this is one of my earliest memories. Like, I remember we had a teacher asks us to take turns reading subtitles to the class for some kind of educational film that they showed in class or something like that. So I've always had this, and I remember watching lots of movies and everything subtitled. Then after, when cable arrived, mainly was also a lot more subtitles. Like on TV, if it's like just regular TV, it's usually dubbed. But then cable had subtitled, and then usually when you rented VHSs, where you had the option to rent dubbed or subtitled. And in movie theaters, it's the same. There used to be a lot more subtitle, but now there are a lot of dubbed films too, which is kind of annoying for me sometimes because I have less options, like fewer options to choose from. But yeah, usually we have both.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only movies that should be dubbed are those bad Japanese action films. Stop it. That kind of with the lips not matching. Those are the only movies that actually should be dubbed.
I just really like things in the original language. There's a Mexican TV show that was big, that is still big in Brazil, but that I grew up watching. It's a Mexican TV show from the 70s that ran into the 80s also. And here I grew up in the 90s watching it. And I watched it dubbed. So I've always watched it dubbed. But after the internet, I've watched a lot of those episodes with, in Spanish. And even if I don't understand, there's so much more. Like and then it makes, but that's a personal thing. It also makes me want to understand the joke, like jokes that work better, in Spanish. So this is in the translation. So I'm interested in that too. So that's probably why I prefer.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that's my personal preference, but to each their own.
Right. Peace and Love writes, what about deism?
Yeah, deism will be next week. We'll definitely go through that. We're gonna chew the fat on all those different concepts. So that's one of them.
Excellent. Oh. Witness says, long ago, I learned Portuguese by watching Brazilian soap operas on TV in Portugal. Ooh.
Apparently, they're big. Apparently, Brazilian soap operas are big in Portugal.
Wow.
And that would be interesting. Yeah, that would be interesting too, because again, it's considered a different language. I mean, Brazilian Portuguese is standardized. Portuguese in Portugal is standardized. So they're not dialects; they're different languages. I wonder how that would work. I wonder if it's a dub, if it's subtitles. Like I wonder how much a European Portuguese speaker, if there isn't a dub, how much they could understand listening to Brazilian Portuguese and then reading European Portuguese. Like that interests me because there's a lot of similarities.
But
who knows?
I would guess get used to it. They sound different, but you get used to it. The languages I don't think languages are all that different.
Okay.
I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
think that there's more like the cadence is different. There are words that are different, but I I think it's like I can understand European Portuguese.
Hmm.
I think I've never been to Portugal, but like for the most part, you know, it was dubbed in English. Okay,
Oh, okay.
interesting.
Okay.
That's a
That's
whole other
interesting.
thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
Chad,
I grew
European
up on those
Portuguese
soap operas too.
pronunciation.
Chad, does little Chad understand Portuguese?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
Ô, Chadzinho, você entende português? What does it say? Did it say anything to you?
No, little Chad. No, he doesn't like. He doesn't
No.
understand.
I asked him if he understands Portuguese.
Yeah.
I'm gonna teach little Chad Hungarian. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, he
Oh.
likes. Yeah, he likes that.
Yeah.
Very
You want a
nice.
language that blows your mind and makes you crazy at the same time, that's gorgeous and then also terrible, then you go for Hungarian because you go all out on that one. It'll be like, okay, listen, you know nothing. We're going to start when you're a baby and then build you all the way up again because it's just, yeah. Oh, I know German. Good for you. It doesn't help with Hungarian.
Oh,
I know English. Great. It doesn't help with Hungarian. What's
No.
Hungarian?
I hope I don't
similar
ever
to?
have to.
Nothing? Okay.
Wow.
I hope I don't ever
Right.
have to learn Hungarian then.
That'll be the universal language
yeah.
because it's
Oh,
not
by the
related to
way, of the
anything, right?
nerdy bunch.
That's
It'll be
right.
the lingua franca of the nerdy bunch will be Hungarian. Oy.
Oh, very nice. We'll need to do, English subtitles. This is from Sophia again. This was kind of a second part, I think, to the earlier question. The government doesn't just trust the religion to find out, or there's an emphasis in there. The government doesn't just trust the religion to figure out the curriculum. Okay, so the government does not go, oh, that's what you say? Okay, fine. So they actually kind of dig in on their own. I'm with you there. I just, yep, that's me more than anything. I learned more about the structural issues of Catholicism and how to discuss that in those classes than anywhere else. Interesting. It's the structural issues of Catholicism. Now that's what interests me. So that type of thing is what fascinating. So I'm heading to Germany, going to take the class. Mein Onkel ist krank. That's all I knew.
German is nice, actually. When you learn, like German, you got to learn those 4 cases. But then again, if you think of other languages, there's more. But those 4
Right.
cases are actually really important if you also want to learn other languages, especially as an English speaker. We don't have any cases, as
No.
well as most Romance languages don't have any cases. So we're at a
We don't have any
disadvantage.
cases,
if
but
we
we have
do.
a heck of a lot of
Yeah.
conjugations.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. But cases are important.
Here's our last starred question from Mr. Duncan
Oh.
Honig himself.
All
Mark,
right.
this is really
Thanks.
good, very thorough and comprehensive for an overview. Will you publish your Cliff's notes or your PowerPoint?
Cole's notes in Canada, but yes, I can definitely do that. What I'll do, I think, is I don't know how much time I'll have to do. Like tomorrow, I'm gonna make the clip out and do everything. But I think if there's any other information, Duncan, just I don't know, message me and see like if there's any other clarifications. Most of the stuff that I use is just basic definitions, and then there's also like a lot of books, but then those books are long, so then it's more of a summary. But I can try to figure out some things, some little more, I don't know, what do you want to say, Cole's notes type things if you'd like. I would say a lot of the stuff I can even find. I'll give you a recommendation if you'd like. There are 2 good YouTube channels that are by religious scholars, and so you can go on there if you'd like. One is called Religion for Breakfast, and then the second one is called Let's Talk Religion. And they're both really, really good. And some of their earlier videos will just be on like, what is religious studies? And they're usually 6 minutes, 7 minutes long, maybe maximum 10 minutes to start with. And I recommend both of them. Just go from your discretion because they are mainstream religious scholars, and they have a lot of interesting stuff. So I would go from there if you want more information. And thank you also,
Awesome.
Duncan. I appreciate your kind words.
That's great.
All right, one
Very cool.
more for Mark, and that should cover it. From Tiff45, Mark, you're beautiful, sweetheart. Glasses, purple, yellow, diamond, inside and out. I don't know who that was
Thank
for,
you.
but it's
I
for
don't-
you now.
Okay, I'll take it.
That's right. That's right.
I like the name of the emojis. Glasses purple. Where is it?
Glasses, purple,
Glasses
yellow.
purple, yellow diamond. And then when you read it, it sounded just so great. Glasses
Wow.
purple, like you are. Glasses purple, yellow diamond, inside and out.
That's right. You have those
That's what it
glasses
sounded like.
inside of you and outside of you.
Let me see if I can find that emoji. Glasses purple, yellow diamond. Oh yeah, I got it. Okay. Glasses purple, yellow diamond, inside and out.
There we go.
That's what you are, Mark. Your glasses purple, yellow diamond, inside and out.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
Merch.
Merch.
Nice.
Little Davy would love that. So
Yeah.
Little baby David.
The Keebler Commander.
I like this one because it goes in your front pocket.
oh yeah.
Pocket Dave.
For me, that's his
the
loud yapping illegitimate son. Because this is with this being.
Oh, okay. That
So,
works.
there we go. Glasses, purple, yellow, diamond. Glasses, purple, yellow, diamond. Glasses, purple, yellow, diamond. Glasses, purple, yellow, diamond. Glasses, purple, yellow, diamond.
Beautiful.
So,
Beautiful.
Well, good to me.
last call for any questions or comments from the chat. Little Davy's waiting.
And Pocket Dave is waiting.
Look at that. He's even got legitimate hair. You know, like that. All that big David hair. The color that it actually is.
Yeah, my
These
channel
are-
got a few more subscribers. Sorry, I
That's
didn't mean
nice.
to interrupt. Apologize.
No, I was just going to say
Yeah, I'm
these
over
are hair,
40 now.
These are hair plugs. How many?
That's
What's
great.
where are you at?
I'm out over 40 now, which is good. 42 or 43. Let me get the exact numero for you
Great.
guys.
Numero.
But yeah, I'm
Just
over
the
that.
beginning.
Maybe I'll do something special if I hit 50. I'll do a video, like a thank you video or something. When I hit 50.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's
I
cool.
say
Like
when you break that, I know it's a ways off. And you maybe even if you want to do it earlier, that's cool too. But at that 500 mark, when you've like first hit the welcome to monetization part of the
Right.
that nice little AMA, little ask me anything, just hop
Yeah.
on and just let people ask the question. That's fun. I even did that and I had nothing to say, so
Yeah, I'm somewhere
whatever.
around, what am I at now? I am at 43 subscribers, 60 watch time hours, and 315 views. So I did get a little uptick. Thank you so much for that, everybody. Like appreciative, beyond belief here. And I'm just extremely appreciative of everyone coming in. And like I said, look out also for, I clipped out of just the presentation, and maybe I'll clip out a couple things here and there over the week, like our little talk on language or something I can throw up as well. Just any other questions or something, just contact on me on YouTube, and we'll move along for next week with theological stances, which again is going to rock people's worlds.
Awesome.
I'm going to have another very visual PowerPoint.
Love it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Very
And by the way, I think I've told you that
I'm a
already,
visual
but
learner,
I'm loving. Yeah, I'm loving the I love the fact that you're clipping the PowerPoint parts of it, because last week I wasn't able to be here, and then I could still watch the presentation, which was very interesting. Because I think it's hard for people that are not watching live to go back and watch 3 hours, 2 hours, but you can watch the presentation, which is very, very good. And on that note, I'd like to also let you know that I'm probably not going to be available next week again. So I might also going to have to catch it on replay, which I hate because I'm absolutely fascinated by these lectures. But thank you very much, Mark.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great.
And,
Thanks,
Last-
everyone. Thank you, Steve-O. Thank you,
Yeah,
Chad. Thank you
I was
very
going
much.
to say,
Alan,
last
everyone.
reminder to everybody, swing on over to at Mark A. Turi. It's MARK, letter A, TURI. Swing on over, subscribe to Mark, like this, like this, and check out all of his other, the other stuff that Mark has added. It, as he mentioned earlier today, it's not just the Nerdy Bunches that we've done, but it's other interviews and other conversations that Mark has done with everybody, going back to Mark Bunker back in 2009, but includes Doug. I mean, it's just it's fantastic, and it's a great breadth of information. So please swing on over, check those out, subscribe. That's all we can say. And thank you to everybody who has joined us once again on a Saturday morning, depending on where your time zone is. For I guess it's afternoon everywhere now. Well, not if you're in Hawaii or other places. Anyway, depending on where
Have a
you
good
are,
night. Have a good morning. Have a good day. Have a good evening. Wherever
all
you
of
are.
that, all of that. We look forward to seeing you once again next week. So,
And if
Have a good
anybody
one, guys.
jump
Thank you
who's
so
interested, jump over to Doug Scott Kramer's Dazed But Not Confused to watch Helicopter. We're a little bit late, but we can catch it on replay or catch the beginning later. I think it's going to be well worth it.
Yeah.
Helicopter at 1.5 speed is awesome. So,
There you go.
all right, see you guys.